Hi, Jeremy here, Modern Vitality. If you're dealing with a complex chronic health condition, there are three things you may have heard, either from your doctor or friends, relatives, the internet, right? Wherever you get your information, there are these three different reasons. I think they're all garbage in terms of explaining where complex chronic health conditions come from. And the first one is psychosomatic. Oh, it's all in your head, right? The second one's genetics. Oh, this is just how you are, right? And then the third one is old age. So I'm going to leave the other two for separate videos. We'll dive into that in different videos, but today we're looking at old age, and I've seen this as a cop-out. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this from patients where they say, oh, it must just be old age. Oh, I don't know, maybe I'm just getting older. Well, you are getting older. We're all getting older. But the assumption that getting older and getting sicker have to go hand in hand is total trash. How do I know that? Well, because right after the patient who tells me, oh, it's just old age, and they're 45 years old, and then I'm seeing somebody who's 86 and has way more vitality and energy and less pain, then we know it's not just a factor of age, right? I know this sounds obvious, but here we are. I'm going to explore this because if it's not age, what is it? We actually have to redefine what we mean by age. We have to take a look at what does this actually mean? Is it a number? No, clearly not, right? But there's something else going on biologically. So if you can get your head around this, right, then we can stop copping out to the old age fallacy about the cause for why you feel the way you feel. It's not old age, right? We can't chalk it up to that. So what is it, right? Let's get into it today. All right, let's get started. So I'll tell you a bit of a personal story. When I was a little kid, I remember my grandmother was 63 years old. And she wasn't doing very well health-wise. And she had a lot of health challenges, and she was on oxygen, right? She had a little oxygen line under her nose. And she was one of my favorite people in the world when I was a little kid because she was hilarious, by the way. She had all the best, inappropriate jokes for a little kid to be hearing. She was always lovely, ready with cookies and just all this cool stuff, just a fantastic human being. And I wish that her health had been better. I wish she could have stayed on this planet longer. I would love to have gotten to know her better. So wherever she is, maybe she's watching YouTube and is getting a kick out of these videos. I don't know. But as a kid, I remember seeing my grandmother going through these health challenges. And I remember imprinting on my mind, oh, she's 63. Okay, that's what old is, right? 63 is an old person. I remember thinking that, and that was my anchor. That was my baseline as a little kid. And now, of course, as I've grown, as I've matured, as I've expanded my worldview, as I've met other people, right? Because when I was a little kid, she was one of the handful of 63-year-olds I knew. I didn't know very many people. I was a little kid, right? So I started to think that was what old was, right? Oh, at 63 is when you start to get old, and people are more worried about your health, and you're in a hospital, and you might be towards the end of your life, right? Well, that depends on a lot of factors, and of course, I've worked with plenty of people in their 80s. Right, that don't have that problem. I've worked with people that are 63 that are triathletes. As my parents themselves hit around that same age and then past that age, I've seen that there are all different kinds of ways you can be 63 years old on this planet. And as I'm getting closer to that number myself, right, it doesn't seem that far off. It doesn't seem old to me. So it's a lot about my perspective. Now that's kind of my personal little anecdote. I just remember being a little kid and in the car and driving back from grandma's house, and she wasn't doing so well, and just thinking, okay, 63, that's old. Well, it's important, right, that the things we learn as kids, and this is just one example, right, that the things we learn as kids, that we don't imprint that forever, because I want to be able to look back at things I figured out when I was like 7 or whatever and be able to kind of recalibrate my reality. Meaning, I don't want to go through my life with a subconscious belief that 63 is old and sick, because one day I'm going to be 63, and I don't want my subconscious trying to create a bad condition for myself, right? Think about that. There's a lot of things that we've picked up subconsciously from our impressions of the world. Some of the work of this channel, of my ecosystem here, is consciously undoing a lot of subconscious things that we've picked up, right? That's not the extent of it. Of course, I'm doing other stuff with herbs and very physical things and gasotransmitters and all this stuff you can measure, right? But also there is a strong mental component. There's a psychological and a subconscious component, and we don't want to be stuck with outdated worldviews. So one of these things about, oh, I'm just getting older, right? Sure, we're all getting older, right? How do I know that old age doesn't necessarily mean sick? Right. And of course, we keep redefining old age, right? Because for me, it used to be 63, and now I've been working with a lot of people, octogenarians, right, in their 80s, and I'm seeing still some sprightly, lively humans with a lot to give, right? A lot still to share, a lot to experience in the world. So where do we draw the line? Where is old, right? And if age is a number that's all in your mind, how can we start to define this a little bit so that we don't cop out? Because here's what happens. And I know I mentioned this at the beginning of the video. Oh, it's psychosomatic. It's all in your head, right? Oh, it's genetics. And these are the things that basically, these are code words so that the medical establishment can save face when they don't know what's going on with you, right? I'm pulling back the curtain, okay? And it doesn't mean they're bad. I got plenty of friends that are doctors. They're well-intentioned, big-hearted people. They're stuck in a system that's not really equipped for complex chronic health conditions, right? And long-term vitality. It's just not. It's not built for medical independence, right? It's not. You can look at who controls that system to see why it's aimed the way it's aimed, right? But this isn't the time to get into all that dark stuff. We're going to focus on the positive here and what we can do. When you get these kinds of cop-out diagnoses, right? Especially if you've got fibromyalgia, Lyme disease, mold exposure, chronic fatigue syndrome, right? Adrenal fatigue, long haulers, all these kinds of things, anything autoimmune, right? Or anything where here's a red flag, right? If you've got an acronym of a diagnosis like MCAS or CRPS or CIRS, SIBO, EBV, right? There's all this like initials. It turns into alphabet soup. And usually you get a bunch of them. You don't just get one, you get a kind of a pile of them. We're getting to the point where a lot of times the medical establishment doesn't know how those syndromes actually work and can't really give you long-term satisfying results in terms of getting your life back, right? Which is just the shortcomings of that particular system. My job, as I see it, is to present an alternative worldview, an alternative paradigm, and different ways to use systems thinking to look at these problems in a more holistic way so that you can start to control the inputs, processes, and outputs of your health, which then means getting those symptoms down, getting them out of the way so that you can now live your life unencumbered by fear that you can't trust your body. Right? Basically having to say no to all these things, not being able to do anything fun, not being able to be spontaneous, not being able to show up and take care of people in your life that need you to be there. All those things are usually a result of the symptoms happening where you're fatigued, you're too fatigued, or you have brain fog, or you've got too much pain, right? Or you're just too inflamed, whatever that means, but you know what that feeling is and you just don't want to do anything when that's happening. Right? So a lot of that stuff needs to get handled, but it needs to get handled not just at the superficial level. So what often happens when you go in you're doing your best, right? You go in, you talk to your doctor or whoever you see, and they take your history and it's complex. And you've got symptoms coming out of every body system imaginable, right? And it's a head scratcher condition, right? Which is where I love these. So typically, if you're not seeing a specialist or somebody who's got a depth of experience in this area, they're going to come to try to figure out what's causing this, right? And a lot of times they'll brush it off and say, well, maybe it's all in your head. Here's your psych referral. We want you to go see a psychologist, right? You have a history of some early childhood trauma or some stressful events in your life, that kind of thing. So that's probably what it is. And it's just manifesting physically, and you need to basically get your head sorted out. So here's a shrink and, maybe some pharmaceuticals for that. And we're going to send you towards the it's all in your head department, right? Which is sometimes true, right? Most times it's really offensive. I found the people that I work with, like in our program, they know that sure, there's a mental component, there's a psychological component, there's a mindset piece that's huge, but this isn't something that we just invent and make up, right? So a lot of times the psychological they kind of brush you off and put you in that camp. It's really offensive and it's invalidating. And most people I've met are pretty actually pissed off when the doctor suggests that it's all in your head, right? Now, the other one is genetics. So, genetics. Well, it's just genetic. You've got a mutation. You've got the MTHFR mutation. So, you're just doomed to have these problems and all this. Maybe. Genetics is young, right? Don't let them trick you with just because they've got printouts on paper and it looks quantitative and it looks like science. It's a very young science, right? We haven't got it all figured out. So let's not attach to false certainty just yet on a very young science, right? Especially if it doesn't lead to any kind of positive treatment. So if you're looking at your genetics and saying, well, I just have some bad genes, maybe, okay? Some people, sure. Some people they've lost the genetic lottery, right? And they're starting at a very big deficit in terms of health and vitality. Even then, is that the end of the story? Right? No, of course, you can always get better at things. Our epigenetics, right, our ability to activate and deactivate certain genes and have them expressed differently is heavily influenced by lifestyle. What's lifestyle, right? Movement, how you breathe, what you're eating, what your stress levels are like. Are you sleeping? Do you get sunlight? Are you using herbs, right? These kinds of things. There's a lot of lifestyle that will actually kind of turn on or turn off gene signaling. And then guess what? We start looking at herbs like Chinese herbs. which is where I've got a strong background there, right? I have kind of a bias towards Eastern medicine because I've been doing it for a long time, and it's great. But you start to look at the science behind, okay, so these herb formulas are supposed to be good for XYZ condition, like wandering pains or brain fog or trouble sleeping or whatever. How are these working? And then you'll find that certain herbs can turn on or turn off gene expression. Isn't that cool? So they take some of the code your body already has, and it's either dormant and it gets activated and now you're expressing more healthy traits, or it's something that needs to be dialed down and modulated down, and the herbs help do that. Certain types of breath work, right, are going to affect how your system's functioning. Self-care practices. There's a lot of stuff we can look at, right? So when we cop it out, we say, oh, it's all in your head. Get out of my office, right? Which, by the way, to go deeper on this, I know some of my colleagues are watching these videos, which are, these videos are for patients, okay? But usually I've got peers and practitioners and colleagues kind of taking a peek and checking in on what I'm up to, which is fine, right? Come on in. I've got mentorship for practitioners. You should look at that if you're a practitioner. But while you're here, why this happens is oftentimes cognitive dissonance on the part of the healthcare practitioner, meaning I want to be a good doctor, which means I know what's going on. I see a case that's a mess that I can't figure out. Now that conflicts with my self-image of a good doctor. So most times medical professionals, it's in their best interest to clear out that cognitive dissonance where they're trying to balance two different beliefs, right? I'm a good doctor. I always know what to do. I don't know what to do. I'm not a good doctor, right? And they get this one out of their office as soon as they can so they can go back to their precious worldview of being confident, right? Which is fine. It's okay. But that's for patients. That's why this happens. And it's oftentimes very subconscious, but when they're shuffling you out and going, hey, go to the psych place, it's all in your head, or looks like it's genetic, right? Genetics, we can't do anything about that. That's just your code. You can't change that, right? They're getting you out of their office so they can go back to doing work that they're better at, right? Seeing different types of cases that they're better at so that they don't have to feel less, which is okay. It's human. We're all human, right? I do the same thing by specializing. I'm not above this. So by specializing and going, hey, I go after these complex chronic cases. This is my wheelhouse, right? Then I can go very deep on that. I can be confident. I can move around within that ecosystem and that environment and navigate that. Of course, but somebody with a whole different, maybe dermatology or something. It's not my specialty, right? But I would refer that. Go see somebody who's specialized in more of a dermatology, right? Or whatever the thing is, So I've got my world of complex chronic health conditions, cancer or something. Maybe there's going to be a specialist for that, right? Not exactly my wheelhouse. I know where I live. Okay. So it happens to all of us, but that's why if you feel like you're getting shuffled out of medical offices or kind of like referred out, it's oftentimes because they're ill-equipped to handle you. They know that, but they don't know who actually is. So they kind of copy out. All right, it might be all in your head. It's probably your genetics. And then this one about aging, which is why I really made this video. This is one of my favorites because it's something that even the patients believe. Oh, it must be just because I'm getting older. Stop, right? Stop talking to yourself like that. We're not going to approach old age that way. So let's get into this. Let's define old age a little bit because it's sure not 63, right? We're not going to put a hard number on there and go, okay, 63, time for everything to start falling apart. Okay, that's not it. What we're going to look at in Eastern medicine, aging is seen as, of course, a natural process, right? Life, nature is cyclical, and there's a rise, and there's a peak, and there's a decline, and that's just how things work. There's winter, spring, summer, autumn, winter, right? And then, of course, if you've seen my videos on the 5 seasons, there's kind of some transitions points in between there that are important and noteworthy, right? But within the course of a human life, we have the same kind of thing. We go up, we go down, and that's our life. That's the poetry of it, right? Now, the going down part doesn't have to be horrible, right? A lot of times our Western culture, we tend to keep aging and all that separate. We outsource that. We put people in care homes or whatever, and we try to stay away from that and pretend it's not happening because we're all somewhat in denial that eventually we're all going to go through senescence, right? Which is basically the loss of function as we age, right? And eventually disappear from this incarnation. And whatever happens after that, I don't know, right? I can't make the video on that one here. But what I can do, my job, my wheelhouse is while you're alive in this incarnation on this planet, and to try to optimize what's going on with your body, right? Try to get you out of the pit of complex chronic health conditions, get your systems working better so that you can go about living your life with more purpose, right? And some people say, well, what's the purpose of life? I don't know that one either. I've got some guesses. There's probably 5 of them, right? But one of them is being able to connect and being able to take what's inside of you and being able to express it outwardly and inspire other people and connect with other people, right? And when you are sick, fatigued, exhausted, inflamed, whatever, that candle light that you have inside tends to burn a little less brightly. It makes it harder to connect with other people. So that can be kind of depressing too, I know. So as we look at this aging process, oftentimes in Eastern medicine, we say that aging is a process of shrinking and drying out, okay, which you can see physically a lot of times where the bones will actually get a little bit smaller. If you've ever noticed that. I remember also being a kid, and my other grandmother, I remember she was saying, oh, you're getting taller and I'm getting shorter, right? Something's happening here. It's not just the kid is growing, it's like grandma's shrinking a little bit too. And that can happen, right? The actual physical shrinking and the drying out, and the skin starts to lose some elasticity, and the blood flow tends to be a little more stagnant, and we get problems in the feet, especially where the blood's not really getting returned very well, which again, we have ways to offset this when you start looking at herbs and different practices that help to undo some of that damage over time, right? This shrinking and drying out happens physically, and it also can happen mentally, where our perspective shrinks, right? And we become mentally less supple, more dry, right? More fragile, more brittle. And we get, not only do you get kind of shrunk into your body, but also the activities you want to do, you have to start giving things up, right? Oh, I don't do stairs anymore. Well, your world just shrank, right? That's shrinking. And also shrinking your perspective around what kinds of conversations you want to have, how nimble your mind is, can you take in new ideas, right? And that's not necessarily a process that has to happen in a great degree, because there are still people, whatever you want to call old age, in their 80s, 90s, there are still people that are laughing and discovering things about life and trying new things, right? And open-minded and constantly reading and learning. So we don't have to shrink and dry out just because the clock is ticking, right? So the other thing I would say here too is that the healthier part of the aging process means, if you look at it in terms of what's kind of the purpose here, it means going through life, gathering up experience and becoming wiser, right? There's a big difference between knowledge and wisdom, between being clever and wise. And I've spoken about this before, and it's something we talk about in our group a fair amount in terms of short-term and long-term. And, if you're going to approach healing, you want to have a plan that's like a wise plan that has longevity and is thinking in terms of months and years, not days, right? You need to have like a long-term plan if you want to get long-term better and have a sustainable path towards medical independence, which means decreased need on external interventions, right? So wisdom oftentimes comes with a long-term implication, and you get this by living a life. Right? I've got my own definitions around wisdom and how I look at that, but I think everybody has an intuitive sense of what wisdom means. And it doesn't mean something quick, right? You have to earn wisdom. And oftentimes that takes some time, right? So the idea here is, as we get older, we're on the earth longer, we become wiser. And then of course, when you factor in the capacity to share and connect with other people, as you become older and wiser, now you're conveying information, you're helping future generations. Right? You're able to give little advice and be a mentor and be a guide and just kind of walk along the path with somebody younger, whether that's somebody in your family or somebody you kind of taken under your wing or whatever. It's a great way to connect with other people. So it would be silly to say that only older people can be wise and younger people can't be, right? Because we know there are some people who are young who just are wise people, very self-aware, very mature, right? It's really interesting. I think the internet has actually helped to speed this up, because when I was a teenager, the general culture of teenagers in the 90s, which is when I came up, we were nowhere near as kind of self-assured as teenagers that are coming up now. It's really quite amazing how much I see people have their life together, right? Before they've even finished high school, right? I want to call them kids. Some of the kids around, they carry themselves like adults, right? And we weren't doing that, when I came up. I think the internet's advancing some of this. It's compressing wisdom. So actually, if you want to pay attention, you can be very young and be quite wise now, because we have access to so many other forms of condensed wisdom, right? But anyway, I don't want to get too off topic on that. Just like saying that younger people can also have some wisdom, right? It's the same thing as saying that older people can also have some health and vitality, right? It's not like you only have energy when you're young and you only have wisdom when you're old and towards the end of your life, right? I'm unwise and young and full of energy and I feel great, and I'm old and dried out and shrunk and full of wisdom, right? This is kind of the irony of like, in general, we look at life and there's that saying that youth is wasted on the young, which I really kind of enjoy. I think it's a funny way to look at it. But in reality, there are plenty of people that have been on the planet for a long time that have taken care of their body in the right way, even if they had a history of complex illness. And I've spoken before in other videos about how people with illnesses are actually lucky. I know this sounds counterintuitive and kind of offensive sometimes, but when you look at it, we are lucky because we get the impetus to take care of yourself. You cannot ignore when your body is screaming at you. You start to learn how to take care of yourself, and that actually sets you up for a better future than somebody who's been comfortably numb their whole life and then suddenly looks around and their body's just shutting down with no warning, right? So that's something to keep in mind too. We can be older, we can be wise, and we can also be still nimble, right? And you want to be able to get your life back. Another way that I know that illness isn't a function of age is because what about the people I work with where, and this is something I do in my program, is I always have new members, like as they're onboarding, getting set up and kind of they're getting their herbs and all that. One of the things I have them do is take a selfie video, or at the very least take a photo of their face, right? So that way, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is later, as they're going through a process, working through the stages, right? Immune, digestive, neuroadrenal, blood circulation, secret stage 5, where we do the boosting and that kind of thing, right? As they're working through the stages, they can actually look back and compare photos of themselves, right? Here's me today. Here's me 2 years ago when I started over here. And you can see the difference in the eyes. You can see the difference in the skin, the luster, the glow here. You can see their spirit change, even the default expression on their face, one of kind of sadness and almost mourning, and changes to one of like optimism and curiosity, right? You can see the energy underneath. And it's because they're getting better, they're healing over time. This is really dramatic and really cool. But that's also a factor because where, one person is today, right? They're 2 years older than when they started. So if it's true that as we get older, we get sicker, then how is it that I've got somebody who is less sick than they were 2 years ago? How is it that we turned back their biological clock while the chronological clock was still ticking? Okay, so I know I've explored this from various angles. My main point here is if you're chalking it up to old age, there's probably a lot more to the story. Don't cop it out, right? Do not use age as an excuse for not feeling your best. Usually what that means, and this is no fault of the patients, this is actually no fault really of even the medical system. It's just they don't know, okay? Usually what that means is that if we don't know how to fix it, we just chalk it up, right? What that means is you've hit the edge of understanding when you start doing cop-outs. Well, it's just your genetics. Must be all in your head. You must just be old, right? Well, how come I've got 40-year-olds saying that they're old? When I was a kid, I thought 63 was old. And then I've got 80-year-olds, 85-year-olds, right, that I've worked with that are going out dancing and living it up and flying around to the Galapagos Islands, right, to go look at sea turtles and, I don't know, weird birds and stuff. They're out living their life, right? It's not a set number. It's a mindset. And of course, right? Of course, none of us live forever. Old age will come for all of us. But why not push it back as far as you can? Because if your quality of life is up high, right? And you're having a quality of life where you feel the vitality, you wake up in the morning well rested and energized and excited about what the day is going to bring, you're living your life. Who cares about the number, right? The longer we can do that quality of life, then quantity of life becomes a whole different conversation. So if you're dealing with a complex chronic health condition, don't let anybody tell you it's all in your head. Don't let anybody tell you that it's just your genetics, there's nothing you can do. Don't let anybody tell you it's because you're old, because nobody even knows what old is, right? Is it 63? Is it 80? Is it 100, right? Some of these futurist things is 150 or something, we're going to prolong our life. Who knows, right? You're as old as you feel. So let's work on getting you feeling better. How about that? If you'd like to be in an environment that's supportive, that's got people of all ages, right, working through this process, you might consider joining our group. It's Modern Vitality Solutions and Support. It's free to join. The link is in the description below this video. There's an application. I'm going to be checking it out. I want to see what you write. I want to know how you think. I want to know what's going on with you. And if I take a look at your application and you look like a great fit for our group, I'll get you in as soon as I can. I keep it cozy. Sometimes there's a wait. Could be weeks, could be months, but I will get you in as soon as I can. That way you can be in an environment where nobody's falling for this stuff. Old age, all in your head, genetics, right? No, we're looking at proactive solutions. While any of those might be true in some capacity, there's usually more to the story, and I aim to find out. So we have a vault full of interactive videos that'll help you get to the bottom of a lot of this stuff. I've got a program that's wonderful. Of course, it's a paid program, right? The group's free to join. You can be in there, be a guest, ask me anything you'd like. I also have a paid program. Sometimes people are considering working with me. They want me on their case. This is the best way to do it. Come on in, take a couple weeks, get to know me. I'll answer any questions you got. You can get a feel for the culture in the group. You can start looking at our logic and how we think. You can watch people from all over the world that are going through this process, and you can see what happens on the good days, and you can see on the bad days when they crash. You can see how we troubleshoot that in real time and help all the people in our ecosystem navigate back to better health and being able to live their life and let that candle flame shine a bit brighter and touch more other people in their lives, right? You want to be able to spread what you have inside. So that's what we aim to do. You can see it all happen in real time. It's very transparent. It's a wonderful place to be. All right, let's get you feeling better. Cheers.